Welcome to the next project. Today we're working on a Fender 2017 Stratocaster American Elite guitar. Going to be pulling out all the factory frets, which are pretty worn, and replacing them with new stainless steel frets. Let's start the next project. I was asked, hey, how much to replace the frets in a Strat with the same frets that are in it? And we came up with a number. And then the idea, the plan changed. Maybe we'll go with stainless. Well, okay, that's a little bit more, but honestly, it's the same amount of work for me. I don't know why everybody thinks it's so much more difficult to do stainless than nickel frets. But anyway, then the plan teeter-tottered a bit more. Maybe it was just replace the frets that are worn out. And then the plan changed again. We went all the way back to putting stainless frets in this. So I received the guitar. It's in a really nice case. It's in very good shape overall. It is a musician's guitar. It's been played, and that's why the frets are pretty well worn. The frets were about 30% worn through, and to level and crown and everything would bring all the frets down, change the whole feel for the player. So we really needed to go forward with replacing the frets, make it all new once again. I took an initial review of the whole guitar, documented all the nicks and dings and scratches and everything that were in it, just so nobody would say, hey, you put a nick in my guitar. No, it was there. In fact, I fixed a couple little things that were wrong with it. The volume knob is one of the problems. That thing would barely turn, and I found out when I pulled the knob off, I had two O-rings mashed underneath it. So it was really stiff. When I pulled the knob off, I realized that all I had to do was tighten it up, and I put a piece of felt and an O-ring in there, and it works really nice now. Off topic. Tearing it apart, I took all the tuners out and put a piece of tape with a letter on it designating which tuner it was. I want to put them right back where they came out. Here we're going around scoring the nut, get the finish off of it, heat it up, and the glue lets go, and it pulls out nice and easy. It's a really nice bone nut. Pay attention to that. We'll be talking about that later. There I was actually putting as much back bow in the neck as it would take. My thinking is that if I can give it a lot of back bow, it lets up a little bit of the bite it has on the tang of the frets. So you have to remember, once you put back bow in it and you pull the frets out, you have to flatten the neck again. You have to twist the truss rod the other way and get it level, straight, I should say. Here I'm using a small pair of wire nips just to gently lift the edge of the fret, and I use an iron, a soldering iron. I started out with a 40 watt, and it wasn't putting out enough heat to get the job done in the timely manner. So I went up to, I have an 80 watt iron, and that got the frets warm right away. Follow that up by crushing the little bit of tear out there might be back down. I use a round shaft screwdriver for that, and then I wick a little bit of super glue right back onto wherever the tear out was. It's not an issue. It'll all get sanded out and cleaned up. So this actually takes quite a while. So there's a lot of this going on. Total time for this project, case open to case closed, was probably about 10 hours of working time. That's pulling it out, inspecting it, making all my measurements and documentation, pulling frets, re-leveling the fingerboard, prepping frets, putting new frets in, polishing, reassembly, everything. About 10 hours. Frets are all out, and the truss rod is readjusted to get the neck level, or straight again, I should say. Cleaning up a little bit of the super glue off of there, checking the radius. Well, this is interesting what's going on. Oh, Fender calls this a 9.5 to 14 compound radius fingerboard. I clamped the neck to my neck beam 2.0. It's just a chunk of 2x4 that I can clamp to my bench in a number of different ways. And I can clamp a neck to this beam so everything stays put. Put a couple door shims underneath the neck to make sure it doesn't flex while I'm sanding it. And I use 3 different sanding blocks, a 9.5, a 12, and a 14. The 14 is really long. It's the big aluminum one. Don't worry, I didn't use the whole length of that sanding beam. And I intermixed my sanding so I could really reintroduce a 9.5 to 14 inch radius on this neck. It went really well. There were some flat spots throughout the whole neck, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. But overall, the neck looks great. This is an ebony fingerboard, and it's got the natural beauty marks or blemishes, whatever you want to call it. It's not a black ebony. It's a mixed ebony. I don't know what you call it. It's ebony of some sort. Did some final polish sanding with 1200 grit. This is really just to help get it a little bit smoother and ready for final polishing, which will happen a little bit later. Chasing all the fret slots with a fret slotting saw. This is a Japanese pull saw type saw. And I was also able to verify the depth of all the fret slots. So it is about ready for fretting. Okay, it's a good time to take an intermission. We have got a lot done on the neck already. All the old frets pulled out. I verified the radius of the neck. I thought this was probably 9.5, and it is up here. And it's a 10 and a 12 and a 14. This is actually a compound 9.5 to 14 neck. The funny thing I noticed when I was putting my little radius doohickeys on it is that it wasn't really round radius. It was faceted radius that had kind of the edges rounded off. So it would be interesting to know how Fender goes about creating their compound or conical radius necks. But anyway, I used a 9.5 inch block, a 12 inch block, and a 14 inch block, and intermixed my strokes to get it all nice. And the feeler gauges actually fit on it really well now. I shouldn't call them feeler gauges, the radius gauges fit on it really well now. No strange faceting-ish look. So we are ready for frets. I do have stainless steel fret wire that is like 2 thousandths larger than what came out of this. Close as I can get. 2 thousandths is like human hair thickness, so we're probably not going to notice that too much. We're ready to get those cut and nipped and ready to press in as we continue the next project. I'm using 12-inch pre-radiused fret wire. It's all cut to, I think there's 24 in a pack or 25 in a pack, actually. I think they give you one spare in case you send it across the room or it gets lost, or maybe you accidentally cut something wrong. That could happen. I'm also using StewMac fret cutters. They do work on stainless steel, and also the new StewMac fret nipper. I do have my old fret case nibbler that I bought off Amazon. I do use that. I just didn't use it on this particular job. I might save it more for nickel fret wire. The nice thing about these newer StewMac fret tang nippers is they have longer handles, so you have a little bit more leverage. Stainless fret wire does cut harder. It's more of a snap than a cut. So longer handles are nice. This project went pretty well overall. I did undercut the tang just so it wouldn't stick out the sides of the fretboard. When I was putting the frets in on this guitar, I used some tight bond in the fret slots just down the middle, about an inch wide piece. Tapped the frets in on one side, and then I took it to my press, which is an arbor press with radius fret cauls. And I did use a number of different fret cauls on this since it's a compound or conical radius neck. I used a 14, a 12, a 10, and a 9.5 inch fret call, or radius fret call. Changed it out as I was going along. When I felt like the call wasn't pushing the frets all the way down on the sides, I'd swap out the call. Clean it up in between pressing 5 to 6 frets. Just a little bit of water to get the tight bond off, and it cleaned up really well. The frets are going in great. If anybody says you have to just use the exact radius for stainless frets, honestly, I don't believe them. I've heard a lot of things I don't believe about stainless frets. Personally, they're no harder to install than nickel frets. They do cut a little harder, and they will damage some tools more than nickel fret wire will, but honestly, they go in just as easy. doing a little cleanup using the StewMac fret cutters here on the wider spaced frets. And now I'm switching over to some fast cap fret cutters. I've used these for years and years and years, and they've lasted really well. Here's a homemade fret end file. It's a chunk of pine with a couple notches cut in it on my table saw. And I have a dedicated file that I've cut the handle off of, cleaned it up, eased the edges, and it presses right into that slot. And I've got two of these. One of them is a 10 and 20 degree angle. The other one is a 0 and a 30 degree angle. So depending on what I need to do, I just pull the file out of one slot, stick it in another, and go to town. Pretty easy, pretty cheap. Getting the neck ready for fret leveling using a fret leveling beam. I use a Precision Contractor's level, not a sanding beam, but I used the flashlight feature on my cell phone and a notch straight edge to verify that I had the neck nice and straight. Also ran a straight edge across the top of the frets just to get an idea of what I was going to be facing, how much work there would be. And I followed that up with a fret rocker. Now, I'm not really a fan of fret rockers because every fret rocker I've had was actually defective. I have had to straighten the edges on every fret rocker. That's not something you hear people talk about, but maybe I'm just not lucky, or maybe I'm just picky. But I'll get a new fret rocker and I'll put it against a verified machinist square, which has straight edges, and every fret rocker will rock. So how do you verify if you have high or low frets if your fret rocker doesn't have truly straight edges? Well, I'm sure there are great fret rockers out there. I just have never had the pleasure of owning one until I've repaired it. So we've got it ready for the next step. I would like to introduce you to a new magic marker. Oh, and look, that is fret oil. What? Fret oil? That's crazy. Snake oil? No, fret oil. I watched a video some time ago, well, recently actually. It was pretty recent. And the gentleman was doing some fret work, and somebody had suggested to him the tool that he was using should have some lubrication applied for the fret cutting. And I was like, man, that's a brilliant idea. I'll have to try that. So I'm not using the contraption he was using, but I did put a little bit of oil on my fingertip and wipe it across the top of the frets. And I did not have any fret grit build up on the diamond file for the entirety of this fingerboard. Didn't clean it once other than to wipe it off like that. The nice thing is the oil gets on the fret grit, or the diamond grit, and it keeps the filings from plugging up the grit. It kind of helps everything just float. Seems to work really well.
A slight interjection of information into our project. I am using StewMac Z files. I have a couple of them, and it's a love-hate relationship with these. It's really with any diamond file, or any file, but diamond files especially. The problem I have is when you use them on frets, the grit you're filing away gets plugged up in the diamond coating. And you can go from having a fret file that cuts really well on one fret to not cutting at all on the second or third fret. So you constantly are cleaning grit out of these. Where I'm going with this is I watched a video recently, and I don't remember who, but I'll find it and post a link to it and the gentleman's repair shop in the description. But he suggested through comments in his videos to use a lubricant for cutting. And I was like, well, that makes sense. Machine shops use lubricant for drilling and tapping and lathing and machining. Why not for filing? So, story goes, typically I'll get 1 to 3 frets and my fret file's plugged up. I have to clean it. Spend a few moments every other fret basically to clean the file. Slows things way down. It's irritating. I used a little bit of Rapid Tap, which is a very thin oil meant for tapping threads or whatever, or drilling. I use it a lot for drilling. But I put a little bit of that on the surfaces of the file and also a little drip on my finger, wiped on each fret. I didn't have to clean the file for the whole fretboard. I did wipe it off, which the grit is floating. It's not actually embedded into the diamond, so that's cool. First time I've tried it, jury's still out, but the way things went so far, it's a keeper idea, and maybe you should try it too. Let's get back to the regularly scheduled program.
I want to say, if you find a way that works for you, the way to do something, but other people do it differently, well, you can try what other people are doing. That's fine. You might learn some new tricks. But if something works better for you, the way that you like to do it, keep going like that. This is one example of how I do things different than a lot of people. I see video after video after video of people filing the ends, and they file from the outside up onto the fingerboard and across the fingerboard. I'm going from on or over the fingerboard off of the neck. It's just the way I work. I'm a little backwards, but it works for me, and I feel it's kind of a built-in safety for me typically, because I'm filing away from the fingerboard and away from the neck instead of up onto it and over it. So if I slip, and when I slip, and I do slip, I'm going off the fingerboard instead of onto it and over the frets. So maybe this will work for you, maybe it won't. Ooh, look, we're gonna dress and polish. All right, we're getting close to having this project wrapped up. And what I'm doing here is working across the fingerboard side to side in the direction that your bends would go, not the length of the board in the direction that the filing or the leveling went. This helps remove those nut to butt or nut to bridge file marks or sanding marks. By sanding across, we are hopefully removing the lengthwise scratches and making a more playable surface. Here I'm trying out some microcloth pads. These have been around for a long time, and I'm giving them a shot here. I did use some different nail polish pads, and those worked reasonably well. These were dirt cheap. I did wear through them pretty quick, but they do work. This particular set, I think I can get like one stainless steel fret job out of a pack of these. So, maybe that's not a bad deal. Moving right along, we are into the polishing of these frets. Again, I'm using Mother's Mag Polish, which is just a metal polish, Dremel style rotary tool, and a wool buffing pad on the end. If anybody says, oh, the frets get too hot doing that, you're gonna wreck the frets. I don't know what they're doing. You don't have to sit on them for 5 minutes. It's like 5 seconds of fret and you're done polishing. Well, if you've done enough front work, then you're done. Peeling off the protective tape, everything's looking pretty good. Moving on to a polishing wheel on a cordless drill. And I think I used some red rouge compound, pretty mild polishing compound. Removing the neck from the neck beam, and it's ready for, okay, we're not ready for anything. A little more polishing. Yeah, now we're getting close. It's looking really good though. Got to clean it, make it look better than factory. Just needs a little cleaning now and some oil, and it'll be ready for rock and roll. Time to put this project back together, and we're putting all the tuners back where they came from. All of them had a little label stuck on them, so I knew if it was a B, it went back for the B, or G, or D, or whatever. They all went back where they came from. A little bit of wax on the screws going back in, and a tip: turn the screw counterclockwise first until it drops into the existing threads, then tighten it up. People say you have to put in metal inserts in necks. No, you don't. If you don't screw up the threads in the neck, it will last longer than you will. Learn how to install a screw that has been removed, and you shouldn't have any problems. Especially if you ever work on plastic things. Really important. Giving it a test run here. It's making some sound. No buzzing, no craziness. All good.
right, we're wrapping up this project. It's gone really well. Stainless steel frets in it, using a little bit of lubricant on the file. Huge difference, huge improvement. I'm going to try it again, keep trying it. I think I'm going to like it overall. It worked great on this project. The new frets were like 2 thousandths taller and a couple thousandths wider than the existing frets that were in it. But once I leveled and recrowned and dressed and polished the new frets, they're the same height as the ones that came in it. So we're good there. I am going to be able to reuse the original nut, which is a bone nut. It's nicely cut. It's perfect. Why replace it if we can reuse it? So I'm going to reuse it. I do have the original strings on at the moment. That was just to check, make sure there's no buzzing, no craziness going on anywhere. Make sure that the old nut would work. It does. So I will be polishing this up a little bit, gluing it in, and then putting new strings on it, and it will be ready to go back to the owner. So I think we're pretty much done with the hard work. I'm gonna make some noise with it now. Hide your women and children, put away your dogs, your cats, any delicate animals. Get your earmuffs and your remote control handy.